Peter. So I want to start, Caitlin, welcome first off. I want to start with you with immigration about, there had been a back and forth of exactly where the president stands.
Right.
What do you make of negotiations right now?
Right. Well, the White House released that framework on Friday, and they're supposed to have another unveiling talking to lawmakers on Monday. And it did get a lot of pushback from a lot of different places within the Republican Party and on the Democratic side, of course. The White House thought that bringing the 1.8 citizenship pathway for 1.8 million people, which is more than DACA recipients, those eligible for DACA as well, they thought that that would be a way to get Democrats onto their side. But the requests for that are pretty high for Democrats. And then you have a lot of Republicans who are very concerned about anything that they call amnesty. And so you're going to have some pushback. The question I have is how the president tries to build, if he tries to build a coalition to bring people together. You have both Republicans and Democrats kind of looking to the president to see what he can do, and I think we'll hear a lot more about that in the State of the Union address.
It was interesting to hear the background briefing from the White House and saying, okay, we kind of expected to go through the Senate, but it's going to have to be reconciled and sort of figured in the House. What are you hearing about negotiations now?
You're exactly right to point out the differences in the House and the Senate. Right now, the negotiations are starting on the Senate side, and remember, a few years ago, the Senate passed a comprehensive immigration bill with bipartisan support. It polled pretty well, but the House had no appetite for it. They didn't even take it up. And I think that's going to be a similar situation here. You have multiple factions within the House Republican conference who are upset about this proposal, who want more. You have some moderates who are on board with some things and not the others. So getting through the Senate will certainly be a hurdle. And also, the House is an entirely different question. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, is saying that, the committees and the bipartisan group involved will be in charge of crafting legislation, that the White House framework is just that. It's just a framework at this point. But it does jive with a lot of things that some Republicans have wanted.
Caitlin, when you look at the calendar, February 8th is when government funding, the spending runs out. February 6th is the deadline. The White House says that they want to get this through the Senate. What do you make of that timeline?
It's a great point. This timeline is, coming up very, very quickly. And we saw in the last government shutdown that there was no time really to reach a consensus. I think this will be very difficult. The difference, I think, here is that even that there's nothing else attached to this, that this will be an immigration proposal, but also there are some Democrats who want this to be attached to the government funding bill, and there are others who are fine with it not being so. So we'll see how that legislatively plays out, whether those two things will depend on one another. And McConnell has said if a deal can't be reached, a final deal can't be reached, that he would bring some kind of baseline bill to the floor and have an amendment process go through. But again, who knows what that would look like?
Yeah, it's a lot of territory there to cover.
Right.
I want to switch gears and ask you about the Russia investigation.
Right.
We've reportedly heard that the president tried to fire Robert Mueller. Special Counsel Robert Mueller. What do you make of this, and how do you think this is going to impact the investigation? The president called this all fake news.
Right. He called it all fake news, and any time that it was raised as a question over the past several months, both the president and the White House, officials in the White House, pushed back very strongly, saying he's not even talking about this. You are the ones in the press talking about this. And so this report makes clear that that's not necessarily true, that there was an attempt, and of course blocked by Don McGahn. So in some ways that shows that the people around the president can work in terms of impacting his decisions. But it also raises questions, again, about why is he so intent on stopping this investigation, this probe from the Mueller investigation going forward? There are all those questions, of course, about his firing of Comey, what he told Comey in regards to Michael Flynn. So the question again and again is, why is he trying to do this? Republicans that are allies of the president say, look, he didn't fire him. So that's good news, right? But the question of why he is trying to, I think, moving forward is something that people want answered. And of course, Mueller, I'm sure, is going to want that question answered when he talks to Donald Trump.
Yeah, speaking of that, the president said he looks forward to testifying and speaking with Robert Mueller. How critical of a moment do you think that if the president sits down with the Mueller counsel, how critical do you think that'll be for him?
Extremely critical, because we're not sure, what the parameters of that discussion will be. You've had the president at times saying that he's more than welcome to sit down with Robert Mueller and he's willing to do so under oath. And then you've had his lawyers say, wait a second, we're still ironing out these details, which will be important. I think there are concerns, of course, about what he would say. Remember, in that impromptu briefing that we saw the president give to reporters before he was heading out to Davos this week, essentially said that, obstruction is nothing. I fought back. And I think that was kind of concerning to a lot of people. So what he says, you can't lie to the FBI, you can't lie to special counsel, whether you're under oath or not.
Looking ahead to the State of the Union on Tuesday, what do you think the president needs to accomplish in that speech?
Right. This will be a big deal for him, because he is going to be laying out essentially an agenda for ahead of the midterm elections. So back to immigration, that's really what I'm going to be focusing on, because I want to see kind of what political capital the president is willing to spend on his own on this issue. Remember, he campaigned as a hardline, as someone who had hardline principles on immigration. And so whether he tries to move his base towards the citizenship pathway for dreamers is one thing. I'm kind of looking to see how he pushes lawmakers in this speech.
It'll be fascinating to watch next week, especially coming off the heels of Davos.
That's right.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you for joining us, Caitlin.